Welcome, everybody. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Shields.
Okay. President McNall.
I'm here.
Vice President Clements.
Here.
Trustee Headland.
Here.
Great. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Ms. Shields.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Great. Good evening. Since our meeting scheduled for February 28th was canceled due to what's become a pretty rare snow day, this year at least, our agenda for this evening is pretty full. It's kind of a hybrid workshop business meeting that includes special education detail report, budget topic, special education, as well as the administrative budget proposal. We're meeting in the library today because Haldane Drama, so they can have sort of uninterrupted access to the gymatorium, where they're rehearsing Roger and Hammerstein's Oklahoma as we speak, 17th, 18th to the 19th. If you don't have your tickets, get them now. I believe 8 and under is free with an adult ticket, so that includes some folks. I feel like it's my time to be the pitch man, but I will. Our next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, March 21st, 7 p.m. in the Auditorium. So it'll be a workshop meeting. Workshop topic is the elementary middle school detail reports. The budget topic is pre-budget hearing, of course. I should say that the Board of Education trustee candidate petitions are available in the district office. You can contact Megan Shields, our district clerk. The annual district meeting and trustee election will be held on Tuesday, May 16th, 2023 for one 3-year term commencing on July 1st, 2023 and ending on June 30th, 2026. It's amazing, 2026. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Benante, who I'm sure will have a lot to say about our very successful and triumphant Haldane basketball team.
You're reading my notes.
No. I just had a feeling. I had this feeling.
Yes, I'm going to start with a congratulations to our boys basketball team who won their first sectional championship. I believe it's been since 2015 was the last time the boys won the sectional. Great game this past weekend over at the county center. And good luck to the team. They take on Rhinebeck tomorrow, 8 o'clock at O'Neill High School across the river. Hope to see many folks there. Also wanted to wish our students who are performing in Oklahoma next weekend good luck. I'm excited to see the show, and I encourage others to attend as well. Ticket information was distributed today, I think broadly. More information is on the Haldane website for anybody who's interested in attending. As Sean mentioned, last week's workshop meeting, tongue twister, was canceled due to the weather. I'd like to highlight just a few notes that our administrators included in their reports, which are included in their entirety in the agenda. First, our 8th graders had a great trip to Frost Valley, great opportunity for our students to connect in the outdoors and with each other and disconnect from their cell phones and other technologies. Where I know they had some snow, which has become snow days few and far between. So they had some snow up at Frost Valley, but had a great trip overall. We recognized last week or the week before our high school valedictorian, Mairead O'Hara. Congratulations to Mairead, and salutatorian Kate Bolte. Both students really embody excellence, not only in the classroom, obviously, but are also engaged in athletics, extracurriculars, co-curriculars, many opportunities that they've taken advantage of at Haldane, and we look forward to hearing more from them at commencement later this school year. Mr. Elder represented Haldane at the Teacher Diversity Job Fair this past weekend, which is hosted in the lower Hudson Valley, and met with approximately 24 prospective candidates for anticipated openings at Haldane for next school year. It's a good opportunity for candidates as well to hear about some of our efforts and commitment efforts and commitment to diversifying, our workforce, and to learn about the positions in which we anticipate having opening for next school year. And I appreciate Mr. Elder's attendance and representation of Haldane at that event. And just lastly, I'll note that on tonight's agenda is the acceptance of a donation from the boys baseball team. We've discussed this in the past. These are funds that will be used to offset the cost of the field improvements that occurred at Mayor's Park. And I'm happy to report that that project was completed earlier in February. It looks great. That concludes my remarks, unless there's any other questions from the board.
No, I don't think so. All right, moving on to our special presentation.
Yeah, so we'll start with Dr. Cation. Dr. Cation is our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and she'll be presenting two reports this evening. The first is the Special Education Report, which is an annual report that we provide. Regina's going to highlight a few key components of our special education programming, and then she's going to roll right into her budget presentation for the 23-24 school year. She'll take the time to answer questions regarding that this evening, and then I'll transition to provide the administrative recommendation for the budget for the upcoming school year as well. And I think Sean and I are both going to move.
I'm going to
Yes.
go over here so I don't.
We'll go from there.
If I have a question, I'll speak really loud. Don't
Okay.
worry.
That's fine. Do you need a chair? Here's one, okay. Okay. All right, so good evening. Again, I'm Regina Cation. I'm the Director of Pupil Personnel Services here at Haldane. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you. President McNall, Vice President Clements, and Trustee Headland, and Dr. Benante. So as Dr. Benante shared, we're kind of rolling a few things into one, including, basically a board report, a sort of state of the union address, and then we'll go into some budget discussion. But definitely stop me with any questions. Even you don't have to wait till the Q&A section. So. This is really kind of just a summary of a board report, just to highlight a few things that we've been working on in the 22-23 school year. So as you know, we had talked about trying to address a need for a multisensory approach to teaching reading, and with that, we worked on bringing in training to some of our teachers so that they could meet that need at the Tier 3 level, which is our multi-tiered system of support. So children that have had other interventions and weren't finding, adequate success can now have this multisensory approach. We are also using PAF in 2 of our special class reading classes. And so far, so good. We have been tracking it with data, in addition to some of the standard data that was already being collected. For example, DRAs or the NWEA reports. We've also, PAF has built into it some measures to track progress, in addition to just the daily check-ins with teachers, because they do dictation and things like that. So teachers have daily measures, but in addition to that, we've been using the DIBLS, Diagnostic Inventory of Basic Early Literacy Skills, and that's being done a minimum of 3 times over the course of the year. But some of our teachers have decided it was more useful to do even more frequently as like a quick probe. So that's been happening, and I'm happy to say that as per our last meeting with the teachers who are using it, we're getting some pretty good results. So that's very positive. I just wanted to highlight some of the work that we're doing with PNW BOCES and in particular the Tech Center. And recently we hosted a BOCES night up at the high school. And also I was able to attend, along with 2 of our school counselors, an information session, because there's some really terrific programs happening right now. Literally children can train right now to do underground drilling and to do some amazing things that, working with electric vehicles that can really lead right to a career. So we just want to keep those connections going and expand our students' opportunities. As you're familiar, we've been doing the PCG audit. That's well underway. We are now at the stage where we're putting a lot of Microsoft Excel spreadsheets into a secure file so that they can help to make sense of that. And so I look forward to those results and presenting to you in the near future on that. And then we've been working hard on collaborating with our outside resources on mental health, because it's not a surprise here in Haldane, but in the wider community, there's ongoing mental health stressors for our students, and we're seeing, not again across the county, across the region, really across the nation, our young people are having a rough time. So we've been working more purposefully to connect with our resources, and that's going to be ongoing work. When I began the position, there were some, more broad department goals over the course of the year, and I'm happy to say I won't go into every single one because, I know we have a long agenda, but I think we're moving the needle in almost all areas. We're definitely working hard to collaborate with parents and families. So, for example, I think actually Teresa's here tonight, but we've made an effort to really connect with our Learning Differences Committee and to partner with them, which has been really wonderful. There's still some areas of need. For example, I want to work on increasing the information available to our families on our website. So that's, we're moving the needle. We still have a ways to go. I spoke about the audit already, putting finishing touches on our district special education district plan. Part of the delay in that is that's kind of going hand in hand with our audit work, because much of the data that we're gathering through the audit can be incorporated into the plan. And I already spoke about PAF. So there's been some good work, I think, across the board with more work to do, as ever. So just an overview of our students in special education. You'll see the number at the top. If you were to look on our program, IEP Direct, you would see 120 classified students. We have a few children that are in the hopper. They're being evaluated, and so they may or may not be eligible for services. You'll also see 16 students that are currently classified under preschool special education. And we have a bit of a large number in the hopper there. We have 5 pending cases as well. But the 120 at the top is a little deceiving, because if you look through how I broke it down below, there are some students that are our responsibility in terms of special education services, but they may actually live in another district, and they may just be parentally placed in a school like, let's say, Manitou. But in terms of who's here at Haldane within the school district, we have 93 students who are classified, and then we have several of our students whose services and needs are being met at outside programs, whether that's through BOCES or some other special education programs. We also are responsible for the children who attend St. Basil's, but that all gets billed to a different district. We also have 6 children with IEPs whose parents have elected to send them elsewhere. Okay. Yep.
I think that's a new, I don't know that we've ever had the number of students placed in private schools in this list. That seems like it's a new addition.
I think that is new information, yeah.
That's very helpful. That's useful.
Yeah, and there is some relevance to it also beyond just numbers. Our faculty is actually responsible for, let's say a child attends Manitou but lives in Beacon or lives somewhere else. We actually do the actual full evaluation. So our speech and language therapists, our special education teachers, and our department runs the meetings and handles their IEPs, and so it is a part of our work.
So let me I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So if their residence is in a different district,
Mm-hmm.
but their parents choose to place them at Manitou, the responsibility for the assessment of them falls to us.
Yes, and that is not how this law always was.
That's interesting.
It used to be that your district of residence
Right,
handled
that's what I
all of
would have
that,
assumed.
and now it's the school of the location.
Huh, okay.
Can you re-explain what students from other districts parentally placed means? Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Can you please tell us again what students from other districts parentally placed means?
It just may mean in that instance, you might have someone who lives in Beacon, but the parent has decided to place them in Manitou, but Manitou's in our district. Or it could be a situation where they're a resident of Cold Spring, so they're a Haldane student, but the parent has opted to send them to a private school elsewhere.
Okay. But then the privately placed by parents, those are children attending a private school in the Haldane School District.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
There'll be a classified student, a Haldane student who's
Haldane
entitled
student.
to come here
And could be anywhere.
but the parents opted to send them elsewhere.
Yeah, these do feel like new terms to me, so I'm not familiar with them. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate the
I'm happy to
clarification.
explain. Yeah, no, and I did kind of drill a little further, like looking into what is our percentage of, what is our percentage of classified students, because we have to be very careful about overrepresentation of some groups in certain areas in the United States. There can be actually the data goes in both directions, as Peggy would appreciate. If you look at the data one way, you can see that there are certain subgroups that are overclassified and overrepresented in special education, but not in all areas, because those same groups can get neglected in certain areas, and more the affluent families and the squeaky wheels get the services and other kids get overlooked. But it's just something that we do keep track of and are aware of. Yeah. And our classification rate, I would say, is pretty typical. If anything, it's maybe 1% above where like school districts might be, but it's pretty typical. That being said, just again, an aside, I could go on all night, I won't. But we are seeing some changes in the nature of classification. So for example, learning disability has for a long time been the largest classification group of the 13 different categories. And generally speaking, that percentage is going down slightly, and we are seeing more children classified under autism. And that's not a surprise, because we're seeing an increase in autism. We also have something called Section 504, and sometimes that can be confusing as to what is a student who gets special education services versus a student that maybe has a 504 plan. And the 504 plans really are just, it's federal law and has a lot more to do with access, leveling the playing field. So if a child has a medical condition of some sort that is preventing access to everything other children are entitled to, then they might be entitled to a 504 plan. But it isn't the same thing as special education services. That being said, we have a total of 53 students currently with 504 plans. That's up quite a bit from last year. We had 45 last year. It is something that we're keeping an eye on and just making sure that we're really sticking to the procedures and the law in terms of eligibility and making sure kids have what they need, but also not layering on too many supports where it's not helpful.
At the highest level, can you talk a little bit about what's the right word? Services that accrue to 504 vis-a-vis services that accrue to an IEP?
I think the biggest difference would be that with an IEP, which is an individual education plan, a student will have some kind of special education support. It might be a special education teacher who's modifying curriculum or providing some kind of pre-teaching, reteaching, or even sometimes a different curriculum. It might be speech and language therapy and things like that. Whereas a 504 plan would be more about accommodations. A child may have pretty intense ADHD, and maybe they need breaks during a test. Maybe they need extended time on a test, but they don't need special education services per se.
Thank you.
So this is again looking at some of our numbers, and these are our preschool numbers through the years. You can see that we were up around 15 or 16 classified, and then the numbers started going down. I think it would probably be easy to mention the correlation with the pandemic, perhaps. I do know that there were quite a few children who didn't go to preschool initially because of the pandemic. So that may explain the dip, but I'm not so sure it's everything. Right now our numbers are starting to tick high again because we already have 16 classified under CPSE. That's the Committee on Preschool Special Education. And we have 5 children who are going through the evaluation process currently. So that may go as high as at least 21 before the school year's out. So I can say that speaking with other districts across the county, both actually Westchester and Putnam, there does seem to be an increase in need, an increase in children with needs in preschool. So for example, there are waiting lists at almost all of the special education preschool programs right now, and it's also becoming increasingly difficult to get special education related services for a preschooler. So for example, today I had a meeting and the child was found eligible for PT and OT, but I might not be able to get a physical therapist or an occupational therapist to deliver that preschool child services in the next few months. So it's a problem that the region is aware of. There's some talk about how we might have to rethink how we do special education preschool, but it's just something we should have on our radar. This is a brief staffing overview. You've probably seen this slide because I know some of my predecessors, just gave an overview. Pretty self-explanatory. You can see that there's a shared position between the elementary school and the middle school. That's a special education teacher that spends time between both buildings. I think you're aware of some of the work that we're trying to do in terms of master scheduling, and that we have 3 different schedules for 3 different schools. So hopefully at some point in the future, the sharing of staff between buildings is a little bit smoother if we're able to eventually align those schedules. Any questions about the staffing?
I think it's always good to clarify or make distinct what the difference between a social worker is and a counselor, for instance.
Yes. Certainly. So school counselors really have a lot to do with scheduling. They have a lot to do with career planning and with assessments on interests. They also do support for mental health and social emotional well-being. They will run groups. You will find school counselors doing push-in lessons. They might help the 8th graders write a resume, for example. So they do a lot of the work around the functioning of their sort of a little bit more of an academic lean. Whereas a social worker, I would say one of the big differences, the social workers do a lot more liaisoning with the community resources and connecting families with school-based services as well as community-based services. Our social workers also do a lot of counseling. They do crisis intervention. They're almost like that link between families and schools and the community. Does that help?
Okay, that's great. And in the middle school, since there isn't a social worker there, is it an elementary school coverage, or how does the sort of vacancy, or should the...
Yeah, there's a little bit of shared work, but you can see like the elementary school doesn't have a counselor per se, and the social worker at the elementary school, who is Renee Curry, really does focus primarily on K through 5, but she also works with the 5th graders transitioning to 6th grade, and definitely works very collaborative with our school counselor, Liana Festo, at the middle school. At the high school, our social worker is Scott Manny, who does do most of the counseling, crisis intervention, and all of that. He does a lot of work with connecting families also to resources and collaborating with everything from the hub to other resources.
Just a quick question. Grant funded? What's the grant?
So we were able to, through actually it was through the county, but it's actually a federal grant having to do with COVID. We were able to apply for a grant to fund a school counselor for half of a school year, which is an amazing thing. Now, it worked out because we had a school counselor doing a maternity leave here. So when the other counselor returned, we were able to do grant funded to keep her for the rest of the year, which really the timing could not have been better. First of all, she had already started working with students, but we really have seen a year where we have needed all hands on deck in terms of support.
Thank you. I remember that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going away?
I'm afraid it
All right.
could be. It could be. It's because the grant money for COVID is not.
Yeah.
If we hear that it's extended, we're going to apply again.
Sure.
And certainly we're keeping our eye out for all sorts of funding resources
Sure.
if there's any way to do it.
Sure. Okay.
So this was just an overview of our continuum of services. So if you're familiar with special education or not, we often talk about a continuum. And the idea is that we start with what is called the least restrictive. I don't like the word restrictive. But we basically try to give children as little as they need to be able to get access, even if there's still a struggle, in essence. So an example of that would be a child who's able to attend a general education class, but maybe they need some occupational therapy. But by and large, they're in the general education class all day. They may also have something called teacher consultant services. A teacher may give them a little bit support, but also may consult with the general ed teacher to support them. And as you move up the continuum, we have other options on the menu. So we have something called a resource room, which is primarily in our middle school and high school. And those are small groups that work with a special education teacher. It's not a new curriculum, but they're supporting the students' learning in the content classes. They may be supporting executive functioning and learning skills, but that's one of the options. We also have something, as you move further up the continuum, something called co-teach. I would say that co-teach or integrated co-taught is a model that's used widely throughout Haldane. That's sort of our what is most available, I should say, and services the most number of students in Haldane. So the co-taught model is desirable in many ways because it keeps children as much as possible in the general education class, and what will happen is during a core class, like a math or English language arts, a special education teacher will join the class and support the children who have individual education plans, but they also support other members of the class. There can be there can be station teaching, there can be partner teaching, and several different ways to conduct that. But we have that available at Haldane in kindergarten through 12th grade, primarily in ELA and in math. There are some places where we're able to provide it in science and social studies, and I think Dr. Benante will talk a little bit more about how we might open up a few more sections in the high school, but I don't want to get ahead of us. The next step up in terms of support is something called special class, and this is where a group of children will get pulled out of the general education class to have a little bit more intensive work in a particular subject. So these will be your children who are significantly behind in math or significantly behind in reading, who really need that intensive dose of instruction. They might need a different approach. That's where you'll see some of our multisensory approach for reading. There may be a slower pace. By and large, we're still trying to target the standards for the grade, however, but hopefully the idea is in these rooms, children can still achieve that with the more individualized attention and instruction in the smaller group. In Haldane, we have several of them running. They tend to be multi-age, which works out fine. We try to group children based on profile. So you might have, for example, a reading group in a special class, and there might be third graders and fourth graders in that group. And that's fine. It's really according to what level are they at and what do they need. It's also kind of the only way to do it in a smaller school district. The next step on the continuum is if a child needs a more specialized program. So this is where it can become challenging to manage in a smaller school district, but the truth is some larger school districts sometimes struggle with this as well. So if a child really does have a unique learning profile or needs that are harder to manage or may need a more therapeutic approach or whatever it is, generally speaking, if there isn't a cohort for that child, we usually have to use our services such as our BOE services, our cooperative education services. So that's where you'll see children going to some of the programs at BOCES as well as some other programs. And there's a range of programs at BOCES. There are some programs that are in buildings like Walden and where they have like a therapeutic program, as well as programs that are embedded within other schools. So for example, we have a student who's over at the Primrose Elementary School in the Somers School District because BOCES rents a space there, and then they're able to integrate into that elementary school and give the child some opportunities for inclusion. So that can be a helpful model.
Excuse me, can you just step back a tiny bit from the mic? Your peas are popping. You're a little bit
I don't want to pop my peas. Okay. Yep, no problem. I should just also mention with this continuum, I've kind of highlighted the special education aspect of it, but it's very much intertwined with our multi-tiered system of support. And so children should be going through a process of increased intensity for support prior to getting to special education services, in most cases, unless they have some specific need. The other thing is that there are times where we can have a child who is classified and receives special education services, like maybe they're in a co-taught class, but they may also get Tier 3 reading. Not all of these services are delivered by special education teachers. Not all of them have to be. So it should be kind of a fluid back and forth so that a child may sometimes need Tier 3, but maybe they only need Tier 2 after that because they're responding to the intervention. The other thing is that there are some things on here that just aren't as evident, which is like in the high school, for example, we have an AIS, which is an additional academic intensive support, but you don't have to be a special education student to receive that service. but you could be a special education student who also gets AIS support. So there are many ways that the general education program and the special education program work collaboratively. Another thing to think about is that not every child who needs special services needs a special education teacher. For example, we might have an option with algebra with a lab. So maybe the child needs some extra time in math, but it doesn't all have to be in a co-taught class. Maybe adding a lab to your algebra class is enough. So that's just creative ways to approach it. Any questions on the continuum? So this was just a slide to kind of give you a picture of what related services we provide. So this will give you a sense. It's somewhat of a repeat from a previous slide. I can say that there is a prioritizing of services for children who have mandated services. In other words, if they have an IEP or a 504 plan and they're entitled to services, the related service providers will ensure that they get their services first. But then, if there is time, we like to be able to provide building level services. So if a child isn't classified but maybe needs some course strengthening or maybe needs a safety screen so that they can navigate the bus appropriately. So we were recently able to add 2 hours of our physical therapy time. We contract with a physical therapist, and we had a need for some building level support, and she had some time in her schedule, and so we were able to add 2 hours of PT at the elementary school, which was, I think, a really helpful addition. So I'll pause here if there are any questions.
Small question is about the previous screen. We're looking for a new speech therapist, correct? Or that's something that we're posting for?
So yes, one of our speech and language pathologists did put in her retirement notice. I think that was approved already at a meeting, so I'm not disclosing anything. And yes, we are working on an advertisement for a posting to go out very shortly.
Great.
We're good? Okay. So in pivoting to the budget planning process, and obviously thinking about it all along and continuing the conversations and now having more time in the district, focusing on those Haldane essentials as sort of outcomes that we're trying to gear ourselves toward. I started to think about what are some of the things that should be guiding our decisions. And one of the things that I think I hold and I think the district highly values is providing more opportunities for inclusion for all students to the extent that we can. So part of that is focusing on building our capacity. So that was something that I wanted to sort of consider and prioritize in our decision-making process. As I discussed earlier, enriching opportunities and multiple pathways to success. I think it's sort of broadly known now that, this everybody goes to college and does the same thing path isn't for everyone. So, recognizing there are many different kinds of ways to be happy and successful in this world and many kinds of skills and talents. So that's something that I wanted to prioritize, as well as aligning the resources that we have. So this speaks a little bit toward our focus of the audit, that we're really looking at our human resources are really our best asset. We have some really great faculty and staff and really motivated people here. So how do we take what we have and align it in a more robust way? I referenced the focus on wellness, that there definitely is. If we don't have children who feel safe and secure here, they're not going to do their best learning here. So working on prioritizing wellness for children, which sometimes isn't just focusing on the negative, but also making sure we proactively create opportunities for connection and for joy here. And to do that, I think that's all about relationships. It's all about having this environment where people can talk to each other, where children feel like they're heard. And really, that's actually one of Haldane's strengths, is that I think people really do know each other here, and they care about each other, and it definitely has a community feel. So that's obviously something we want to maintain and build on. So I'm going to touch broadly on some things that we're planning on doing for the budget. But Dr. Benante is going to be really the one who talks more specifically about what we hope to do as a district. So again, I spoke about evaluating the capacity here for more inclusion. So to that end, my hope is that we can create a special class here at Haldane so that we don't have as many children who have to go outside of the district for their services. So that's something that we are talking about and hoping to move forward with. We've also been working to collaborate with our neighboring districts. In the past, through the years, Haldane has been part of a consortium. I think partnerships with local school districts makes a lot of sense, especially in the light of the idea that some of our kids are on longer bus rides and that, it's even hard to get bus drivers right now. But we've been working with Garrison, we've been working with Putnam Valley, we've been in communication with quite a few local school districts to see what we can do together. We're continuing to work on the multi-tiered system of support. That was a focus of the district work last year. So we're looking to continue to extend that work. So that's ongoing. I'm going to click again, Megan.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that.
When I speak of building capacity, it's not just physical capacity. Finding a classroom around here is no small task, but it's also about increasing our understanding of different kinds of learners, and also looking at how we approach all thinking and learning. Using something like the Universal Design for Learning lens, which talks about how we can create multiple ways to access knowing and showing what we know, and that usually when we do that for a few students, it actually ends up benefiting many students. So that's something that's some work that I started doing this year. I know some of it's already been ongoing, but I'm trying to really focus on that. And then we have had a need at the high school. We've had special education teachers who are rather overextended. They're almost all doing, I think they all are doing, extra period assignments, and we've had to really stretch to cover some of those classes, so we find that that's really a priority for our students. And again, back to prioritizing mental health and wellness, and trying to see what we can do to increase our resources. So some of that is work that I hope continues. We've really been working closely with Putnam County, and we're looking to see if we can bring in some Putnam, we're already doing some of it, but looking to do more. And then there'll be plenty more recommendations, I'm sure, coming out of the audit. Some of the ideas that we already have may overlap with some of the recommendations for the audit. But if there was things that we saw that needed doing, we figured let's get started. So our overall department budget is displayed as you can see it. Just like probably your home taxes, things go up. So that is the best number that we can come up with at this time based upon what we know. I will clarify or just, give the caveat that a lot of the budgeting in the pupil personnel department is based on what we know right here, right now. But we could have a student move into the district who has significant needs. We could have some students that were in district go out or out of district come in. So, this is a best estimate based on what we know. I did add a slide. Because, I think it can be confusing as to what is in the pupil personnel department budget. And, it's everything. And again, this is not a comprehensive list, and that graph is really just from Google. It's not to scale. But I wanted to give everyone just a general sense. But some of the heavier costs are in instructional salaries, which is not a surprise. And then it moves on down to some of the BOCE services and contracts. And that doesn't mean just students going out. There's plenty of services that we get through BOCEs that are very, very valuable to our entire district. But this will just give you a little bit of a visual on some of the things that are included in a budget.
I know transportation is front of mind because it's been a conversation with the sister district too. Is transportation included in here for those students who are going out of district? Or
I don't believe so. I believe our transportation is just under its own transportation budget. So yeah, I don't have an exact count in terms of how much special education transportation impacts in the budget. But it does. There are some students that are in schools that, it just warrants their own bus. And so it does impact.
Is that broken out on our line, on the transportation line, so that we can see it?
However we can.
Yeah, I'm just curious about it.
For
Great.
So, if you wanted to see those figures.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's also a potential, as you talk about that special class, if I'm assuming that part of that is, and I think you mentioned this, is to be able to have Haldane students be taught at Haldane, which is rather than outplacement. So beyond the significant benefit of that, there's also the less significant benefit of a potential cost save on transportation or tuition or those sorts of things, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't, we happen to have a cohort of children entering into kindergarten
Right.
that have, somewhat similar profiles, so it's worth considering.
Okay.
And then this was just looking at the BOCES placements and other placements and services, just to give an estimate of, what that runs typically. Generally speaking, we have to allow a little bit of money in case we have a student that needs an outside placement that wasn't expected, so we try to budget that in. We also have to budget in money for children who might be in a crisis and need a temporary placement until other arrangements can be made. So some of those issues are also factored in, some of those eventualities.
Just a quick question on that. I've always thought of, and maybe we've always talked about, unexpected out-of-district placements as being driven by new-to-district students. But I just want to check that understanding. Would there ever be an unexpected, somewhat unexpected, out-of-district placement of a student who we have currently, but then in the following year, the assessment changes unexpectedly, and we need to obviously address that and place them where they are best served?
Yes, it can be fluid like that, and,
Okay.
and it can be, developmentally, children can change.
Sure.
They may be stable for a period of time and then have something that tips the scale, and
Okay.
so they may, in any given month in November,
Yeah.
need something. The goal always is to, if a child does need something, the goal is ultimately to bring them back to district if that's possible.
Yeah.
But we try to predict as best we can. We can't always.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think just to give you a sense of the number of children that are out of district currently, it hasn't changed that much. The 3 that are billed to another district are by and large either at St. Basil's, or they're students who are residents of Garrison, but maybe they needed out of district placement, so we manage it, but it's billed back to their district of residence. And you'll see that there is a jump here driven by and large by the incoming preschool students. And I can say that looking at some of our 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds, I think that number might just stay on the higher side in the future.
Is that, I think you mentioned that, is that consistent? Is that a consistent pattern that other people are, that other
It
districts are
seems to
seeing?
be,
I think-
yes. So just bringing back to the Haldane Essentials, I just wanted to kind of philosophically indicate that, just because a student has an IEP doesn't mean they're not just a full-blown Haldane student like everybody else, and we have the same high expectations, and we have the same desire for them to find their place in the world and to be successful. And I really find it to be, one of my biggest privileges in my life to be able to work with the families here in Haldane and the students in Haldane. It's a joy. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I like that you spoke to the idea of, multiple pathways to sort of success as an adult. And I'd like to think that that's something that we're thinking about across all of our students. And it's great that we're thinking about it in particular for our students in special education. When you present on the audit, I didn't think to ask about this tonight, but I don't know if we've ever heard that much about the high school, the transition services that are in place for students in high school, and so if that comes up in the audit, it would be great to hear about that. And even if it doesn't, I don't want to I think it's something I want to just put on a burner for us to hear about. It's actually something that I've become a little bit more aware of, and it'd be really great to hear what we have in place for doing that.
I think that's a great idea, and I can tell you that the state has different indicators and they rotate which indicator we have to look at and make sure we're following procedures and doing a good job on. And so recently we had to work on transition goals, and we had to look at our IEPs and kind of take a deep dive. And last year, not under me but under the Dr. Benante and the previous director, they actually did some training on transition planning.
Oh, great!
But it's definitely an area that I think is growing and needs some additional focus, not just to Haldane, but more broadly.
I think that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is I think one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and I think because the implications of a student graduating and not sort of being prepared for something is real, and we want to make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. But it's definitely something. Yes, we could talk offline too.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just take a minute to transition to
I think we have
the administrator's recommended budget is battery dead.
I think our keyboard battery is quitting on us.
Nice.
So
There you go.
There we go. Try to get out of this.
Is it a rechargeable?
I don't know what.
So we'll do our best.
Yeah, so I can. Doesn't even look like it has a battery. I can use the mouse, but I think our ability to back up is limited.
So we're going to be very deliberate in pausing on each
will-
slide, and you'll be
I
great
will
about asking
slowly
questions
advance.
before
Yeah.
Megan transitions. First, just wanted to thank Dr. Cation for a very comprehensive annual report and budget report in a very efficient manner as well. Very well done, Dr. Cation. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. Regina introduced some things that I'm going to speak to as well. So Regina very well may have an opportunity just to speak a little bit more depending on the questions that we have as we're moving forward. I think it's important to look back before we look ahead, and in preparation for this evening's presentation in budget development for next school year, I just went back and reflected on some of the investments that the board has supported in previous years, some of which were alluded to, positions that have been created or brought into the district that did not exist previously. And over the last 5 years or so, that's included a behavior intervention specialist, an additional interventionist at the elementary school, increase in funding for athletics through paid assistant coaches positions, increases in arts and education funding that is specific for our elementary school, the expansion of elective offerings at Haldane High School. The board was supportive of establishing a joint human resource and curriculum position, as well as in the administrative level, as well as an accountant position, which has further supported our business office functions as well. We've been able to do all this while maintaining all existing programs for students at Haldane. And I just, not to continue to hone in on the past context or current context, we've done it at a time where the school, I think, has faced unique challenges, both by way of COVID. And as you know, every year the budget can, with the levy limit, can also present just some unique challenges in and of itself. So we've done a lot over the last few years. As we get started here, I do want to thank Catherine Platt, who had a planned trip this week. So I know Catherine was very excited about the budget presentation being last week. I did not ask her to cancel her trip that she had planned for about a year's time or so. So I know Catherine wishes she could be here. I'm sure she's tuning in, but she's not. But I do want to thank Catherine for all of her efforts over these past few months in helping me in developing the recommended budget, as well as our administrative team and our faculty leaders who've also play a big role to arrive at where we are today. So I'll transition just to some more background information. The governor's executive proposal included the final phase-in of foundation aid. Haldane's allocation for foundation aid is right around $2.8 million for next school year. That's an increase of over $700,000 in foundation aid for the upcoming school year. There's been years when our foundation aid has been flat. I'm sure prior to me being here, there's been years where foundation aid has actually decreased. So the fact that over the last 2 years we've received now the final phase-in amounts for foundation aid has put us in a more favorable budget position than we have been in previous years. Just a notation, as I spoke to at a previous meeting, there still is that $100,000 set aside for high-impact tutoring in grades 3 through 8. I'm doing my best to work with our local legislators just to challenge that as they work through the budget development process. We'll see how that shapes up. Regardless, we'll be able to use that funding, I believe, in a way that benefits the school district. But again, I would like just to see us have the $100,000 and not have it attached specifically to that 3 through 8 piece even, would be helpful. We are scheduled to receive, at least in the governor's executive proposal, an increase in our universal pre-K aid of $232,000. That's an increase of over $100,000 for pre-K. As we've shared in previous meetings, we're certainly continuing to work at this. We're one of those districts, as many in our region are, face some challenges in getting a pre-K program off the ground. This may help. Our programs locally generally are full. Our ability to house a program in district is limited due to space. But I will say that amount of funding, were space to become available in some way, would allow us now to run our own program, as opposed to engaging with a local entity that may have to take reduced costs just to hold seats for Haldane. So that's something for us to consider as we move forward. Presented to you previously, our maximum allowable tax levy will be 1.96%. This equates to about $420,000 increase to the levy. Our rollover budget was $27.9 million. Our targeted budget proposal is $28.2 million for the upcoming school year. If we could transition here. So just taking some of the same information and representing it a bit differently. Our total budget for the 23-24 school year, if we go to the levy limit, is $28.2 million. That represents a $1 million increase. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be a 3.8% budget-to-budget increase. The levy increase, again, would be over $400,000. The tax rate would be 1.96% increase.
And the difference between those two numbers, I'm sorry.
You don't have to go back up.
Right, you don't have to go back. Is that the budget increase typically there's not as big a difference between the budget to budget increase and the tax rate percentage increase.
Correct.
But it's made possible for us to do it this year because of the increase in foundation aid. I'm understanding.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
And we have a slide at the end which will show you the budget-to-budget increase over previous years. We usually do a 5-year look back on that, as well as the levy increase. That's coming a little further in the presentation.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the amount of increase, just the difference in those two numbers.
So this increase in foundation aid has created a unique opportunity for our school district to budget to expand our special education programming. We're also going to direct, or I'm recommending that we direct a portion of that money to expanding our foreign language programming. I'll include some narrative around that, as well as our STEM programming. One thing that I did want to mention as important, a point for further context, as I shared with you earlier this school year, we've engaged in quite a bit of work internally in examining our master schedule. And we probably owe you a report on that at some point in the future. I don't want to give you the report tonight, intermingled here, but we are also being strategic with the foreign language edition in particular, anticipating potential shifts in our scheduling in the future and some additional staff needs that may arise. So there's a good opportunity here to address a current need, expand program, and also prepare for an anticipated shift in master schedule in the near future. So segue from Regina's presentation to mine. I want to note that when we went in the through the coherence planning process a few years ago, we had several values that were discussed as it related to that work. And they're often, I don't know if we emphasize them enough. You know, we have the posters here with the essentials that are listed, but you'll see just 4 important values that are listed underneath that. That is, our groups were engaging through the coherence planning process really rose and were established as a sense to guide us in our continued conversation as it relates to programming. One of those values I just want to highlight tonight: we must be inclusive, provide multiple pathways to success, and strive to meet the needs of all learners. And I think Regina spoke very well to that value around inclusivity and expanded opportunities for inclusivity at Haldane. So with that, we're in a position to create, and we're recommending the creation of a kindergarten through 2nd grade special class. This will be a class that in time will house no more than 8 students, but has 1 special education teacher and 2 aides. Currently, we're designing the program to support students who are on the autism spectrum or who have similar needs or profiles. I think Regina may have said it. If not, I'm filling this in, that we have 4 students who we anticipate in the immediate future would be good candidates for this program, who are anticipating to enter into our program, into our school next school year. They're of kindergarten age or rising kindergartners, if you will. And then creating the class provides us opportunity, whether we have additional students we identify who could be a part of the classroom or who are in surrounding districts. As Regina noted, we're reaching out and continuing to grow our relationship with Garrison and with Putnam Valley to receive students from those districts who may fit the profile for this classroom as well. Likewise, they may have programs, and they're in relative close proximity to our school district, where we have students who would fit their class profile. And in lieu of going to an out-of-district placement, like at a BOCES or another program, potentially that's an opportunity for those students to stay in closer proximity to Haldane. In addition to that, our recommended budget also includes funding for an additional secondary special education teacher. This will help to expand the continuum of services that are offered to secondary students who receive special education program supports. And the costs here are reflective of the salary and the benefits for the individuals who are coming into these programs. Obviously, the special class is higher in that there's aid support that is also scheduled or incorporated into that cost. So we're also recommending including an additional foreign language teacher position in next year's budget. We currently have a need in the area of French that's the immediate need we would like to address in terms of student access to the higher level French course, French 5. But this will also enable us to run an exploratory program at the intermediate level. Grades to be finalized. We have to spend a little bit more time fleshing this out. I will say, though, that a foreign language exposure class at the elementary level is something that we have discussed as a school district in our past. We've been unable to secure the funding or lift that program off the ground. This will enable us to begin to do that work.
Do you mind if we make comments as you go
No,
along?
please.
I mean, it's really interesting, and I wish I had a better memory about how everything rolled out over the years, but there have been years past where we had a special class, a special education class.
Yes.
And I know it was an elementary school. And then I also remember really clearly when we had to reduce our French offerings, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it really does speak to the challenges, I think, of being a smaller school district, but also, there were the changes in foundation aid, and, they're just these realities of really how things are going to shift. And it's actually really, to me at least, it's promising the idea that we could begin to reintroduce, some of these programs. I mean, I also just want to sort of put in context what you're laying out. Yes, it is an expansion of our current programming, and it may not be exactly what we had in the past, but it is actually also moving back to what we had in the not so distant future, some of these things.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a few things there, Peggy, that are relevant. Funding kind of shifts year to year, right? So certainly with a levy limit, that can put some unique stressors on your budget development. State aid has shifted over the years, and again, that can be a unique stressor. We're also smaller as a school district than we were 10 years ago, so the fact that we have fewer students sometimes forces us to reconsider programs that we were offering in the past versus what may have been considered at that time. And then the students grow up and go on and move, into other schools or graduate from Haldane. So sometimes as you're creating program, you're doing it around the students you have at that moment in time, but those students go on and move on to other things. And then recreating program is something that can be difficult, and that's something I'm sure we have entered into discussion around over the years. So I think more just stepping back from it all, though, a continued point of emphasis over the last 5 years that I've been here has been how we could, exploring ways that we could expand opportunities for our most neurodiverse students to remain in their home schools. And that hasn't been easy to do in each case. And even with this, as Regina noted, we're still going to require securing a certain number of out-of-district placements for our students. That very well may be what's best for those students. But I think incorporating a special class not only next year, but considering how we could continue to have a discussion where we have a special class base at the elementary level and then through the secondary level for our students is important for us to consider as part of our core program. So it's there. Again, the profile of the class may shift and adjust over the years depending on the needs of our students, but should we at least secure as part of our core program now, and think of it no different than we would as having a first grade or a kindergarten, if you will. We don't have to run a kindergarten program, but we do, right? There's a value there around that, thinking of a special class program in the same way.
Why don't we, because we're there, why don't we talk about this a little more? Because I have a couple of questions. Because the way I was interpreting how it was initially stated was that it's to a certain extent a reaction to an incoming short-term need, which we're seeing some students on the horizon in pre-K who are going to be at Haldane next year, that we want to be able to include them, and so it's to address a short-term need. As you talk through it a little bit more, it feels more like a statement of core value.
Yes.
Of how we should be approaching education just in general. I was wondering if such a program existed holistically today, how would you think about the need to continue to, what would the balance be between students placed externally and internally? I'm assuming we wouldn't be able to absorb 100% of students because unfortunately it can't be everything to everybody. Right. But if such a program were K through 12 right now, I'm assuming that in your mind, a number of those students would be able to be included at Haldane campus right now. Is that the vision of where you're going?
The vision is, as Regina partly shared, is expanding our continuum of services. Yeah. That we, and as you noted, John, it very well may not be realistic to say we're going to be able to bring accommodate every student who is currently in an out-of-district placement back into Haldane. And there is a reality that when we create a class, we have to have a profile of the class. It's something through the CSE process, the annual review process, that has to be considered, that we're taking students with similar needs, similar profiles, and we're creating a program for those students, or identifying a program that would best meet those students' needs. So there's an opportunity here in that regard, in that we do have a group of students who are coming into the school district who have a similar profile. Every student's unique, but similar profile that we can create a class around. But I think the conversation that it emphasizes is one around our continuum services that we're offering, and how we can expand that continuum. How can we take deliberate steps to expand that continuum to meet the needs of a more diverse group of learners?
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
This is maybe a sidebar conversation. Does the number of students K through second who would be in this special class, are these students who otherwise would be in the co-taught model? Will the co-taught model continue as a way to support learners that aren't neurodiverse? Or, I mean, that's a big question that we can ask. Or will there be some sort of rubric whereby we can...
Sure. Do you want to?
It doesn't have to be now, but it could be something later. I'm just curious.
Try not to pop my piece.
So yeah, to answer your question, I guess to go back to Mr. Headland for a moment, I think there is a reactive a part of this, but it's also an attempt to be proactive and to establish something that I think is around our core values. And so to answer your question, we try to group children according to somewhat similar profiles. No two children are ever absolutely the same. So for this particular group, the reason we're considering a special class instead of co-taught is because we believe that their needs would not be met in a co-taught, that they might get too overwhelmed, that the pace might be too quick. Some of these children, as I mentioned, primarily have an autism spectrum profile. Quite a few of them have significant delays in speech and language. In fact, some of them are largely nonverbal. So we have to find a group of children that would benefit from a really intensive language-based program, which is a little bit more than intensive than you would get in a co-taught. So I hope that answers your question, but I'll stand by in case.
Thanks, Regina. No, that's fine. It's okay. We'll keep going. In addition, we're recommending a level of funding for expanding our STEM programming. This funding will be used to target 5th grade and possibly 4th grade and middle school DCI classes. This would be the introduction of coding and robotics for our intermediate age students. Also, students will have the opportunity through that to learn more about the design and engineering process. So the beginnings of that, which will be great. This would be something that will help get these units and respective programs off the ground. We're also recommending the increase to our professional learning budget. This would continue the literacy professional learning that's going on through this school year. You've seen before you recommendations or updates on math program review as well at the elementary level. So this would include the professional learning support for the transition to a new math core resource. We'd also like to maintain the interventionist position. I've spoken of this in the past. That's being currently funded through federal funding. That funding is going to end next year. We can fund the position in part with the remaining COVID relief funds, but then we would have to build in the district share now of that position moving forward. So we've made a few adjustments, and this is a more comprehensive summary of some other adjustments that are being made, things that are being added, things that are being factored in, that are coming off of the books, if you will, in budget development. We have retirement breakage from a number of retirees that we're anticipating going into next school year. I am recommending the elimination of, this is a one position, the title is an account clerk / typist position. The funding for the interventionist is listed here. We do anticipate an increase to special education tuition. That's reflected there. The new special class program is listed here. The additional foreign language teacher, secondary special education teacher. We're anticipating a modest increase to the BOCES and contractual increases there. The professional learning increase and the STEM and robotics, the STEM increase is also listed here. So if you look at our rollover budget at the top, these adjustments help us arrive at the targeted budget for next school year. I'll just pause there for a second.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you know off the top of your head how much total tuition payments are? I'm just trying to put the 140,000 increase into context.
Off the top of my head, no. I feel that we have that, though.
I know the ranges.
Which one?
Yeah.
Oh, I know the ranges for an individual placement. I was talking about total district cost.
Oh,
I can
okay.
find it.
I think I had that in one of my slides. I think it was I want to say it was in the 900,000.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah, I think so.
BOCES and other placements and services. Yeah,
Yes.
912 for next year. Okay. Yep. Yep. Cool. Thank you. That's all. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. You're used to seeing these charts, which we provide you the three-part budget. The admin components are listed here. Just draw your attention to the last column, which is our budget for the 23-24 school year. The information prior to that we've discussed in previous board meetings. As we go through the three-part, which I know we'll come back to over the next few weeks, I just want to note that the proportion of our spending, the percentage of our total budget, the ranges here over the years is something that's both for the admin, the capital, and the program components has stayed relatively in balance, I would say. Yep. Here you see the capital. I think the most significant shift you'll see in capital as the percentage has shifted over years is that our debt service is decreasing. You know, we're paying off our debt. This is a broader conversation we'll have at another point in time with respect to the campus master planning and any anticipated bond referendum. You want to be deliberate in how you manage your debt service. So taking on debt at a time when it's coming off is a good strategy, just because it's already built into your budget. So that's something we'll have plenty of time in the future to talk about debt service and anticipated debt service. Good there, Megan. And then the program component is listed here. Transition to the next slide, you'll see the budget levy comparisons from over the years. So again, budget to budget is reflected with the dark blue bar. The levy to levy increases are the light blue bar. As Peggy noted previously, in several years here, your budget to budget increase is actually lower than your levy to levy increase. With the increase of the foundation aid over the last 2 school years, as well as some factors that are influencing our levy limit, which this year was more relevant. The levy limit was most influenced by the assessed valuations of properties in our community remaining stable. That seemed to be the primary driver as why our levy limit was lower this year in comparison to previous years. We do have a vehicle proposition, as we do each year. I just want to be remiss if we didn't mention this, right? Because this will also be a separate proposition on the budget. 30-passenger school bus, including incidentals, we are recommending replacement of, as well as some maintenance vehicles on campus. We need to replace our tractor. It is becoming less functional, currently being repaired, and also an additional truck on campus for snow removal and such other maintenance needs. Is something that we would benefit from having. Some key dates that are coming up. Sean had noted the pre-budget hearing at our next meeting, but I'll just draw the board's attention to April 18th, the budget adoption by the board. So this is the beginning of what I would say is a 5-week period of time or so where we have now recommended the budget on the administrative end. We will work through with the board final details related to the budget that we'll actually present to the community in May. So you had good questions tonight. Obviously, we'll continue to engage our community partners. We'll develop a schedule for that. Megan's always a big help with that. So you can hear some of the feedback that the community has. Obviously, we'll have our regular board meetings that we're hosting between now and that time. But at the April 18th meeting, the board does have to adopt a budget to present to the community for the May 16th vote. Any other questions?
Great.
At some point, I'm sure you'll hear some additional questions
Yes.
from our confirm Trustee Clemenson?
Yes.
Yes, I know that there was a question that was put forward by Maggie later on about another agenda.
Yes, we're ready for that one tonight, so we can speak to that.
This is great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I took your chair.
Well, actually, we can actually. Slide chairs. Oh, we'll slide chairs.
We covered a considerable amount of territory. Thank you so very much, Dr. Cation. Thank you, Dr.
And
Benante.
I don't think
Very
I
thorough.
had a chance to thank Regina adequately at the end of her presentation, but thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, really appreciate it. Great. Moving on now to communication from the public. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on our previous special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in, state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion or district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. Please leave your contact information with Ms. Shields. I'm a little bit bubbly because we have someone that's here that's going to speak. So, for Megan Shields for a prompt follow-up from the board president or the superintendent. So.
Great.
And for the benefit of our listeners, would you mind telling us your name as well? So that, thank you.
See. Hi, Teresa Lagerman. I am a parent of a 6th grader, 9th grader, and I'm the co-chair of the Learning Differences Committee. First, I want to thank Dr. Benante for the great presentation and Dr. Cation. Special thanks to Dr. Cation. I think she said one of the goals for this year was increasing communication with families. Dr. Cation has, I can't count already how many workshops she's held with us, with families, after school hours, one of them even before she officially joined in June. So I really do want to thank her for all the time that she's given us. I am very encouraged by some of the proposals here. I feel like this is Haldane not just talking about inclusion, but walking the walk. This special class, from experience, I can say that the earlier we put those extra supports and make those interventions, the less of a chance we have of widening a gap that forces a child to, excuse me, to either be held back or placed out of district. So having those supports at that kindergarten, first, second grade level is really crucial and can really make it so that that child can stay in their community, doesn't have to eventually, go out of school or be held back. So I'm very encouraged to see that happen. And I know it is a big line item, but I think some of you pointed out that it might end up saving tuition costs, transportation costs in the future because the child needs to, go out of district. Also, I want to just point out, I'm also happy to see a continued effort in literacy, investing in training for something that has also been an issue. So also I think that's important to continue. And I love seeing that secondary special education teacher. I wonder if, I think Dr. Cation mentioned that it might be a potential science social studies gap that gets covered. I would love to hear maybe a little bit about that. If I know there's a lot that you still need to talk about, but everything very encouraging. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do with Learning Differences Committee. And I really appreciate all of your support too. So I've seen all of your good work in action as well. So thank you. Great. Oh, come on up. Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to ask these questions. Thank you for the presentations. They were really enlightening. My name is Paul Cummins. I'm a new Haldane parent this year. My daughter is in kindergarten. And so this is my first meeting that I've been able to attend and sort of been able to keep up on acclimating and getting involved. If I have time, I'd like to address two issues. One, towards the end of Dr. Benante, your presentation about budget, there was a plan to acquire a school bus. I imagine those are not electric vehicles at the costs predicted. And I'm wondering if the intention to include that in the budget now is an effort to get ahead of the state requirements to purchase electric vehicles in the future. And I would wonder if there are ways to delay the need to acquire it and to actually consider shifting to electric vehicles. The school buses are not exactly clean. They're not exactly healthy for the students to breathe the emissions. And so something to think about. I'm not sure, since this is my first meeting, if this is an issue that a second issue that I can address now. But sort of in preparation, I sort of watched the last meeting, and in one of the conversations, there was a speculation about the possibility for reducing the class, or increasing class size by eliminating a class for the early elementary school students. And I'm not sure if I'm able to talk about that at this point during the meeting.
So, Paul, thank you for your questions. Typically, what we do, there's a spot at the end of the meeting for my comments, and I'm happy to address both of your points at that time. It shouldn't. Do you plan to stay? It shouldn't take too long to
Yes.
get there.
Okay.
So, if that's okay with the
Yeah,
board,
that's right. Yeah.
we can address those questions then.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. Moving on to our administrator information reports. As Dr. Benante mentioned in his opening remarks, he covered some of the things that are in these reports. Typically, we would be reporting, but we skipped a meeting, so we're going to be hearing from our school administrators in our next meeting. We also have our typical information reports. These are the copies of our financial reports included on the agenda for our monthly business meeting here. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any conversation, any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right. Moving on to consent agenda personnel. Financial. Where are we here? Well, let's go. Well, there it is. Financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Any discussion here? Anything you want to pull out, Dr. Benante?
No, I already spoke to the acceptance of the donation from Haldane Baseball for the field. Other than that,
Great. I
no
guess I should
comments.
point out that we are here voting on something that does in fact impact my place of employment, the acceptance of the grant from the Haldane Arts Alliance, Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, Romeo and Juliet Touring Productions, just for being
Can we,
fully transparent. Yes.
And can we just also acknowledge the school foundation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The acceptance of the grant from the Haldane School Foundation for 9th and 10th grade Lion King trip. So thank you so
And
much.
the Arts Alliance, I think you
That's
mentioned
right.
that.
I did.
Yep.
There's so
Yeah.
many things on here.
I know.
Sorry.
Great partners.
Our school gets to go celebrate the father of one of our students who's in the pit at Lion King, Greg Smith, plays the French horn. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right. Moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Any discussion, Dr. Benante?
None?
No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. I think we're moving on to unfinished business, the Board of Education mid-year self-evaluation.
So I was going into my email to assemble all the comments, and I realized I never sent out to the board.
That's right.
So this is mea culpa.
That's right. We'll call this the Board of Education mid-year self-own.
Well, maybe we'll call it the 75%, maybe not mid-year, 75%
That's
way
right.
through the year.
I
Okay.
think
So
it would be more appropriate when both our other trustees
Yes,
are present to have this
exactly,
conversation
exactly.
anyway. So that's great. So moving on, we're going to have a couple of comments about the superintendent's evaluation, also pushing some of this conversation forward to when Maggie and Ezra join us.
Right. I mean, the main thing I just want to point out so that everyone knows, we've identified a schedule for the events. I shared a document that lays those out with everybody. And yeah, I think I kind of want to switch up the process a little bit this year, but I think it makes the most sense for me to talk about that when Maggie and Ezra are here. And I also just want to point out, we are starting a bit earlier than we have in the past, really wanting to make sure we don't hit the end of the period when we want to do this, right? Which is by the end of May with too little time.
Great, thank you. All right, and then moving on to the policy review, Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the following Haldane Central School District policies as attached: 3420 and 7550.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
These are the dignity for all students policy and the non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district. I know that you've
As a
discussed it.
reminder that these were two policies that we reviewed specifically to examine parent notification rights and to establish that parents would be contacted within a specific time frame were their child either the victim or potential alleged victim or in a case that would involve dignity for all students or under the investigation of such or any discrimination or harassment issue in the district, as well as if the student was potentially the offender and notify parents in a timely manner of that as well.
Great. Any discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, moving on to new business, CSE, CPSE recommendations. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education as presented.
Great. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great. Moving on to the approval of the school photography agreement for 2023-24. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agreement with Christine Ashburn Photography, Hudson Valley School Photography, for the 2023-2024 school year to include student and staff portraits, candid photography, extracurricular photography, and additional photography support as detailed in the attached agreement.
Great. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
There has been considerable discussion of school photography here at Haldane. I don't know, Dr. Benante, if you'd like to
Probably
add
says
any.
it all. It's something that's been quite a point of scrutiny over the years with some of the larger vendors that we've utilized, and a feeling that there's greater quality or opportunity for a better quality, I should say, through accessing the support through a local photographer. I will say that Christine has been great about coming in, meeting with a number of our staff members who play a role in various elements of working with the school photographer, from yearbook to yearbooks or memory books and yearbooks to student photos, staff IDs, a number of things that we utilize school photography services for. And we've been very thorough with this. Megan's played a significant role in helping kind of vet what we need to consider, in all fairness, to make sure that Christine truly understood what the requirements were. And we feel confident that with this recommendation, and think that our families will appreciate her services.
Great. I know that Trustee Valentine had a question about some of the language in the agreement.
And that was pertained to, just for to be candid, whether or not the photographs could be accessed for the individuals who are, and Maggie plays a role in the elementary yearbook specifically, and the answer to that was yes. So we got back to Maggie today on that, and so
Great. Thank
we're
you
all
so
set there.
much. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? No. Moving on to the Haldane Central School District calendar for adoption. Ms. Shields.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane Central School District calendar for 2023-2024 as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Make your plans now for that February break. Let's say that.
It's a whole new world. What's going on?
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. And let's see here. Moving on to I guess, communication from the public.
So I'm actually going to take an opportunity to speak as at this part of the meeting instead of board reflections to announce it's my seat that is up for re-election this year. And I'm just letting the community know that I am going to run again. This would be my 5th election. I was initially voted in for 2-year-long terms in 2015 and 2016. So I've been on the board since 2015. So for 8 years. And I continue to believe that serving on the Board of Education is the best way for me to give back to the community. That really hit home, honestly, during the pandemic, I think more than anything, really understanding, the role of a solid, coherent, knowledgeable board. And So the one thing I do want to point out, though, is I have an unusually heavy work travel schedule for the next several months. It hasn't been uncommon for me to not be physically present for meetings, and that will actually be the case in April and May. No, in March and April, the second meetings in each month. But I will continue to join. I think we actually have a really good system now for really active participation when board members are traveling. And so I just want to be clear that I do understand that can be an issue. I think this will be the last semester that I travel as much as I'm traveling. But I've come to really value being on the board. I'm getting kind of long-winded here. And I'm really very interested in continuing to serve in this position. Right. So thanks to the community for their faith in me in the past, and I look forward to talking to any people who have questions. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. And thank you so much for continuing to raise your hand and wanting to remain my colleague. That's great. I do. Thank you. Board reflections. John, anything?
Sure. Yeah. I was just trying to think there's just so much, but 2 things. Frost Valley, which I know was delayed over the pandemic. My older daughter did not get the chance to go. My son did, had a fantastic time. So I'm so glad that is back up and running. It's one of those classic things you will hear about as the parent of a kindergartner. It sort of becomes lore you get there. So I'm very excited that went off. And it's been really fun going to watch the boys basketball team play. Mm-hmm. It's just fantastic. And I will say again, I think I said this at the end of soccer, it's fantastic to see Haldane staff and teachers go who have no children, but they just go to the games. I mean, it's a great reflection on the community and them. So fun times, and they're winning. So that's always good.
I wanted to say that over the weekend, and for this evening, it's, I think, particularly poignant that over the weekend, Judy Human, who was for a long time a disability rights advocate, a self-advocate, she passed away at 75, and she was a chief among those individuals who moved forward the 504 plan as well as IDEA, and we owe a tremendous gratitude to her as a self-advocate and also to our parents who continue to advocate on behalf of all of our children in the district and our administrators who do the same. So take a moment to remember her, and I'm grateful to everyone for all of your continued hard work on their behalf.
Sure.
Dr. Benante?
My reflection. So, Paul, thanks for your patience. I appreciate it. We've had board meetings where we've had a lot of people here, believe it or not, and some of the processes that we established to make sure there's equal space given to those individuals, we still maintain, because you never know how many folks are going to come. But thank you for your attendance. On the electric vehicle note, this does not include funding for the purchase of an electric vehicle, as you noted. Part of the hesitancy to do so is we don't yet have the infrastructure in place for those vehicles to be maintained here on our campus. I will point out there's some work on our website that points to the campus master planning process, which there's some continued ongoing work, final report coming on, which will include where that infrastructure should be put in on our campus, anticipated costs related to such, and then I'll be working with the board to determine on what timeline for that. Once we have the infrastructure or plan for the infrastructure to be in place, then we're in a position to actually examine whether or not we're going to purchase vehicles and on what schedule. I will say in the short term, the cost of the vehicles continue to be pretty high, although each year the incentives are better and the costs are coming down a little bit as compared to a couple of years ago. And obviously we now have a firm deadline in place from the state. And if I heard you correctly, you'd like to see us get ahead of that deadline. But noted, I should say. Yeah, go ahead. You can use the microphone though, because Cecilia want to pick you up.
I just was, so when you purchase a vehicle, obviously it has a sort of expected lifespan of use, right?
Yes.
And so purchasing a vehicle now a few years from the deadline means that vehicle may remain in use for a long
Correct.
time after the deadline.
Correct.
And so I was wondering if, there's a way to give thought to trying to maintain the fleet that you do have and delay like acquisition to a new vehicle. So
I
we're
see.
not committing
Yeah.
to, a vehicle that will be on the road for, 10 years, 5 years after the
Sure.
the-
I think that's a good point. That's something with our Director of Transportation and Facilities I'll talk about. We do have certain vehicles we have to take off the road by a certain point, but I can understand the sentiment there in terms of delaying acquisition, so we're not locked in, if you will, to that vehicle until that time. That makes sense. So it's a good question, something we'll consider moving forward.
Do you think it would be helpful to explain that since Paul is relatively new to the community, that we actually, to keep our fleet healthy, we actually purchase new vehicles every year?
Yeah. And this is a tax neutral, generally proposition, meaning we're usually bringing a vehicle on as one's expiring or its time is over with us. So it's a proposition we've included each year that I've been here. I'm sure, forever in Haldane time. So yes, that is something that we continue to bring forward. But to your point, as I heard you say, we don't want these purchases to disrupt future purchases, of an electric vehicle. And on the kindergarten class section, as you noted, thanks for watching the previous meeting. And we did speak a bit about class size. I will say that next year's budget doesn't include any new positions in my recommendation for class sections at the elementary school. And my feeling around that is that if you were to look across the total elementary certified class or certified staff, which is really our K through 6 teachers, even though 6th grade is part of the middle school. My feelings are if we wanted to change class size at the it's anticipated to be at any grade level next year, we should first look at our existing staff. And that's something that, and whether shifts could be made there. That's something that we're currently discussing with our staff. We've shared some ideas related to that, and that's where we're at right now. I will say, though, as part of that, looking at the potential influence of first grade would, if there were only 2 sections at first grade, that would mean class sizes of around 19, which is higher than what they currently are now, but I would say are still very competitive in the region. I think class size does matter, but what size is likely to influence student learning outcomes or social development. And I would say even at 19, I still think our first graders can still have a quality experience next school year if that's what the class sizes are. So that's just currently some of my own thinking on that. If you wanted to, it looked like you were inclined to say something there, so.
Certainly. So, look, I appreciate that 19 is still a relatively small class size.
Yeah.
Also, I think probably data that derives and supports that is data from children who haven't been subject to the COVID-19 pandemic and the
Sure.
developments in childhood development and socialization. And so these classes right around the entering kindergartners, the current kindergartners, I think the current first grade class are some of the ones who've experienced the most profound disruptions to their early development. And so I can certainly appreciate the challenges of the budget and the challenges around trying to figure out how to structure class size, how to allocate teachers. And what I'm just proposing is that to keep in mind as you go forward, right, that it's probably a value proposition for allowing these students to continue to have smaller class sizes, extra attention, so that they can, I think, catch up on some of the ways. And I've seen my own daughter, who I thought was smart, like, or
She is smart.
I hope this isn't being recorded. Who I thought who I thought was advanced, getting some feedback at the sort of the first parent teacher meeting that she was behind, and that they were going to work to bring her up. And I think like seeing that is, I think probably due to like the attention that she was getting at the time. And so like I'm giving that as an example, but like I think it is something to bear in mind, and I understand you have to make challenging choices, and there are value propositions you're keeping in mind to do those. But I want to just point out that this is one, and that you may not have like the best data to make those decisions around this current crop of students.
Got it. Well, one thing I think those are great points, and thank you for sharing what you did about your daughter. But one thing I know Ms. Jamin and I have discussed and are looking at is we do collect data on our kids. Schools are pretty good at that. So let's sit down and look at what the benchmark information actually is suggesting to us about student readiness right now in kindergarten. And in particular, as compared to other cohorts of kids that have come through kindergarten before the pandemic, during the pandemic. And does that suggest anything to us in terms of what may be necessary in developing means of support for that class or that cohort going into next school year? So I don't have that for you tonight, but that's something that I think is relevant to this conversation that we are looking at.
May I ask a clarifying question, though? So this is still just like a possibility. There's no decisions being made about this yet, right? I just want to make sure that's clear.
So what I've said to the staff is, in the absence of any other, that I don't feel it's necessary to put another position in the budget. And when I look at our staffing,
I see. Because we have two currently.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
So just to clarify that, I don't think it's necessary to put another general education section into the budget. So my recommendation tonight, as you noted, didn't include that. So if we're going to accommodate it anyway, it has to come from what already exists. And that's where we are with our staff right now. In the absence of other ideas, this would mean that the kindergarten class that's going up to first grade would necessitate what really I should point out, there's a larger group of students that are scheduled to go to fifth grade. That class, that fifth grade cohort does need another section. So it has to come from somewhere. And as I pointed to at our last meeting, while we could pull it from first grade, that's what Paul's noting there. I said something along those lines. Or there's other opportunities to examine what our level of staffing is. But if there's none of those other opportunities are pursued, that means we have to take a first grade section, if you will, and move it to fifth grade, which would influence class sizes at first grade, going from where they are now, currently around 13 to 19 next year. There's 38 kids in the kindergarten cohort.
Thank you for clarifying.
I don't have any further comments.
Questions for the Prime Minister? It's been nice. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Any discussion about that? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you so much for coming.